Other news first, and 12 more months to keep looking for oil. That's today's decision on controversial plans for the Broadford Bridge site near Billingshurst. The company UCOG believes there could be millions of gallons in rocks below the Weald. A number of conditions were raised by county councillors before they made their decision, and campaigners who were picketing outside the meeting aren't happy. Jane Moat is from the Broadford Bridge Action Group.
The benefit of the tape, your name and position?
I don't have a position, but my name's Jane Moat and I'm a member of the Broadford Bridge Action Group.
The decision went against what you were looking for, but there were various amendments. I mean, your reaction, firstly, to what the council's decided?
Well, obviously, I'm disappointed that they've extended this planning permission, but I'm really grateful that they properly listened to what we had to say and that some of the issues, the serious concerns that we raised with our speakers started to be questioned. And I think this is a long-term game. I don't like to use the word game, really, but it's a long-term position for us to say that this sort of operation is unacceptable. And West Sussex County Council has responsibilities that they have to live up to as part of this process. I think what we've done here today is to question whether they are doing enough to really safeguard local residents' interests above the national interest for energy supply. And I think the answer is no. I think some of the councillors now understand why the answer is no. And what we now need to do is see much more action, monitoring and protection of our interests than there has been so far.
That was Jane Moat speaking to Simon Jenkins there. Now, someone else that's been heavily involved in the campaigning against drilling in the area is actress Sue Jameson. Now, she's concerned about the impact on the environment.
It was a foregone conclusion and we're disappointed. I think we've made a little progress.
Although you think in many ways it was a foregone conclusion, this is a democratic process in operation. Do you feel that you had a fair hearing?
I think we had a fair hearing, but I think it's very unfortunate that one or two misapprehensions appeared. There was talk of the fact that there had been consultation about this. In fact, there was a big exhibition for the original application 5 years ago. And since then, there's been no serious exhibition, no serious reaching out to locals to explain more things to them. I think the company have been very tardy about that.
Well, earlier I spoke to Councillor Duncan Crowe, who's the chair of the Planning Committee at West Sussex County Council, and asked what today's decision meant.
Today's the planning application that the County Council's Planning Committee determined was an extension of an existing permission that already existed for exploration and testing for oil on site at the Wood Barn Farm site at Broadford Bridge near Billingshurst. And what the committee decided was to grant that permission so that further testing can be enacted within the next 12 months. But by the end of that 12 months, the site either needs to be restored to its original condition, or it needs to be sort of sealed pending a further application. So
you've put some other conditions, I understand, on the extension as well?
Well, there was one additional condition that came from the committee, which was a lighting plan. And to do with trying to avoid any adverse impacts on wildlife from unnecessary lighting.
What about some that might argue that they've had enough time already? Why do you feel it's important to allow the test drilling to continue for another year?
Well, the planning committee had to look at what was in front of it today, and the application was to extend it for another year. It's not for us to say, well, you should have. You shouldn't necessarily have completed this, or it's wrong to ask for another year. We just purely have to judge it on the merits of what's in front of us, and the application was for an extension of 1 year.
There has been a lot of opposition for this, though, concerns about the environment and possible disruption. Has all this been taken into account? Oh,
absolutely. It was very important that the committee listened to the concerns, environmental, highway concerns, impact on resident or potential impact, and judge those as to whether they were material planning considerations, and indeed whether they should allow the application to go forward or not. And I was very keen as the chairman of the committee to make sure that we did hear equally from both sides, and that we evaluated all the facts, and that we made an informed decision.
Do you think this paves the way then? Is this a step closer to widespread drilling in the future?
Well, no, absolutely not. This was an application, a standalone application. Every application that comes before the planning committee is judged on its own merits, and so we wouldn't say, oh well, we passed that application there, so therefore we have to pass this one. And of course, each with oil and gas, applications tend to be different anyway. This was for further testing, where a future application could be for on a different site, maybe for actual extraction. So no oil and gas application is the same anyway.
Well, let's now speak to Steve Sanderson, who's the Executive Chairman of UK Oil and Gas. Steve, thanks for joining us on the programme. First of all, you must be pleased that test drilling can continue, but why another year? Why do you need that?
I think I should just clarify that it's not drilling. We've actually completed the drilling. The year's application, the grant, is basically to allow us to complete the 14 weeks of testing and then basically evaluate the results should we get the well to flow, and then decide whether or not we put in an application to produce any oil that we get in the testing, and or to restore the site. So it's not a year's more of drilling. We've finished all that. It's actually just to complete the 14-week testing program that we already granted.
But doesn't that testing program involve some element of disruption?
Well, the disruption to the area has been very minimal. I think people have said that there's been widespread opposition. I think that's misconstruing what's happened. I mean, we've had well over 200 people on this site. We've had a very open and transparent operation here. We've answered people's questions. We've listened to local residents, parish councillors, MPs. And I think generally people understand that there's a balance between national interests of energy security and local interests.
Do you have some sympathy for those local people, though, concerned? I mean, would you want to live near a site like this?
Yes, I'd be more than happy to, because I know how environmentally safe it is. In fact, I'd be happy to have one at the bottom of my garden if I'm going to get the royalty that we plan to give local residents around this site. I think people should realise that we're regulated by 4 separate regulators, and the Environment Agency have a very stringent set of policies regarding the operations and the waste management from this site. And I think people don't understand that all that stuff goes on in the background, and it's not something that the county council themselves actually deal with. So I think there's sort of an element of people not actually understanding the system and how rigorous it is.
Well,
I think they think that we can just sort of rock up in a field and start drilling. That is not the case at all.
Well, thank you for joining us on the programme. Of course, bringing you up to date with all the latest developments on that and other stories.